Yeah, we can just go ahead and start talking. There's no point in waiting because most of it's recorded now. So, folks out there in virtual land, thank you for joining us for the next installment of our social equity educational program and mentorship program. We are pleased today to have been joined by some more great panelists and great guests. But first, some administrative stuff before we get to them, their history, their involvement in the industry, how they might want to reach out to you and help you. And then Caleb has some really in-depth knowledge to help guide us through the laboratory testing history and process. And we have an incredible group of panelists who understand it better than anyone. So we're pleased to be able to share them with you and present them to you. Okay, so administratively, thank you again to Weed Maps, Copper State, Scottsdale Community College, and Zuber Lawler, our 4 underwriting sponsors who made this whole series possible. So, you know, just thank you guys very much for making this happen. Our next panel, actually, I don't know the name of our panel for next week. Caleb, do you know what our next week title is?
Yes, next week we're going to cover on funding sources for social equity applicants nationwide. So very definitely very important in the process.
That's going to be a popular one. And we're going to have a whole bunch more information putting out on funding sources. We're going to be trying hard to get as many opportunities for funding as possible out there, information about them out to our social equity applicants as the process goes on. So there's nothing new to report today on social equity. Nothing's changed in the legislature. The state just finished the county backfill here on, what was the date there? April 19th. So we anticipate the big process of determining what social equity means is now going to start over the state level, and hopefully things still will happen through September. But whenever you're watching this, the most important thing is to get to know the panelists, get to know who you can reach out to, and whatever limited but important information we can cover. These are complicated topics, and Caleb does a great job of covering them from the 100,000 foot level. And we have incredible experts here. So if you want to know more, you can always reach them by email. That stuff is on our website. So without further ado, any administrative stuff, Destiny? Oh, Destiny wants to say hi. She's the behind the scenes, making everything happen. Dr. Bobber from Scottsdale Community College just joined us. Will Humble, who has a lot to say about labs, will probably join us here in a second as well. Any other administrative stuff, guys, that I missed?
Nope, I think you covered it, sir.
Okay, cool. Let's get right on to one of my favorite people in the industry, who I've known for a long time and is just a pleasure to be around. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Correct, Ryan? You're on mute, buddy.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yeah, great. And you know, let me tell you a couple of things about Ryan before he reintroduces himself, tells us a little about C4 and his history of the industry. He's just a good guy, and he's just so approachable and such a leader in our growing nationwide community. We really appreciate him taking a few minutes of his time to speak to you and to reintroduce himself out there to those people who are trying to learn and get into this industry or understand it, etc. So Ryan, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself? Please let me know.
Sure. Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Dimitri. I appreciate it. It has been it's been a wild ride now. It's been a lot of years we've been going at this together. So yeah, as Dimitri had mentioned, C4 Lab is one of the original labs out here in Arizona. So we certainly predate the mandated and regulated testing market. It'll be 7 years in November. It'll be 7 years that C4 has been around. We have been a hard charger and very outspoken for the need for mandated safety and potency testing here in the state. Have fought adamantly down at the Capitol for several years, got our butts whipped down there the first few years, and then slowly but surely we started gaining traction and kind of came together in a collaborative effort with other stakeholders here in the market. We just recently, actually no, now it's been almost a year, we moved into a new state-of-the-art facility up at the Scottsdale Air Park. We built that out specifically to get ready for mandated testing, brought on we'd over tripled our staff. So now we're at 26 people on our staff, about 7,000 square feet, have brought in the newest and best, latest and greatest technology. Certainly, felt the pain coming out of the gate there in November and December with that mad dash and mad crush as everyone was figuring out kind of what the lay of the land was. And very excited to say that the improvements and investments we've made since November have resulted in drastically improved turn times, better efficiency. Just overall, we've taken leaps and bounds in a very short period of time. So we're very excited that as the market expands and as more licenses become available and the social equity program gets up and rolling, we're very excited to be able to be a partner from the get-go for folks, to be able to help them from kind of cradle until the launch of the business and help them with formulation testing, R&D testing, compliance testing. We do a lot more than just give data. So we're looking forward to answering questions and being the best partner we can be to the Arizona market.
Well, Ryan, again, but thank you for taking the time. This 5 minutes for people to get to know you allows them a point of contact so they can understand and work with the lab when they need it, which is fantastic. You started the Arizona Testing Laboratory Association, is that correct?
Yeah, I co-founded the Arizona Cannabis Laboratory Association with George over at Level 1. Barb was actually newly elected the president of the Arizona Cannabis Lab Association. It's basically a platform that brings together the different laboratories to make sure that we have a collective voice. We can kind of share industry concerns, best practices, challenges that we're facing. And it kind of helps us take a more organized approach when we're communicating our needs and our challenges to the regulatory body at the Department of Health Services, as well as making legislative efforts down at the Capitol.
Excellent. Well, thank you for doing that. And I know that's a great service to the patients and the consumers, and it's helping to deliver a safer product to all of Arizona. So that's really good stuff. Any other quick questions for Ryan about his personality, his history, his background, anything that anybody wants to
yeah, Brian, what drew you to testing? I would love to hear just what drew you into that particular industry.
Really, it was really understanding and embracing cannabis as a medicine first and foremost that brought me to the industry. I really was fascinated when I understood that there was a reason I felt relief. There was a reason that it was therapeutically beneficial and that I was seeing improvements. And I didn't have to feel guilty like it was a drug anymore when I started looking into the science behind it, right? And I've always kind of had a natural aptitude into science and kind of reasoning in that nature. I saw that there was an opportunity here in the market or a lack of representation on the science and technology side of things. And I think as with any industry, especially when you're in the infancy of it, science, technology, innovation, those are the things that really lead and expedite the maturation process of a industry. So that was just kind of what intrigued me. I saw a need for it. We hired the right people and couldn't be happier. Every day I get to do what I love. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, Brian,
Awesome.
Brian, thank you for being here. And thank you for making yourself accessible. People will get to know you over the course of the summer. We're going to be doing some specific social equity specific gatherings. We hope you can be part of that. I know you can.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
We'll see you next Thursday, right? Or next Wednesday?
Yeah, next Wednesday is the meat of the industry thing. So, of course, you'll be there in full force.
Absolutely.
Yes, it's going to be pretty crazy. I don't want to promote it anymore because we're already at like 400 RSVPs and we're at capacity. So it's going to be a wild ride. We got people flying in, the hotel's filling up. It's too much at this point. They're all coming to see Dr. Humble.
We've all missed it. It's been a year.
Yeah, it's our first gathering in a year, and I'm hoping Dr. Humble can join us. Actually, thank you for joining us on the call. I think Caleb has he's going to start with you in a second in regards to the history of testing, but let me introduce our other panelists first, so that I can get through that. Level 1 Labs, another longtime favorite of mine. George and I go way back. Had some nice dinners and lunches together. Tell us about Level 1 Labs.
Unfortunately, George couldn't be here today. He's on vacation, actually. But my name is Tanisha, and I'm the lab director here at Level 1. I've been an analytical chemist for about 2 decades now, and I've worked in 6 or 7 different cannabis testing labs in several different states. And then recently, with all the new regulations and all the new mandates that was set in Arizona, George reached out to me and just brought me over here. And I'm just so excited to be a part of this trailblazing state.
And tell us a little bit about Level 1 Labs and how long they've been around, how large they are.
Sure. Level 1 Labs.
We lost you. I think she got, so we'll go on to, she's got to reconnect, but we'll jump back to her in a second. Brenda, do you want to go next? Sorry about that.
Sure.
It's okay.
I'm Brenda Shalou. I founded the very first cannabis testing lab in the state of Arizona in 2011. I ran that for quite some time, and I got pulled up into the Las Vegas market. And I was very interested in heading into that market because it was heavily regulated. So I was able to jump into that market and kind of work hand in hand with a couple of labs to, I was consulting at first for the couple of labs to get them operational, and then one of them hired me full time. So I spent, I think, about 4.5 years in Las Vegas running a lab there. And just recently, my husband took a position in Massachusetts. So now we are up in Massachusetts. Another cannabis lab has found me. So I'm now running analytics labs up here in the state of Massachusetts. So I've got quite a bit of experience with the Arizona market. I was working heavily with the state at the time, trying to get mandated testing, get them to understand why it was important, working through their troubles with them having the liability of creating tolerance limits and what pesticides do we test for, and et cetera, which it sounds like Ryan's had a lot of experience with that since I left. And then I also sat on the Independent Laboratory Advisory Committee in the state of the state of Nevada in Las Vegas. And I helped shape some of the rules and regulations for their industry there as well. And I'm hoping to do the same for Massachusetts.
Wow, you're a good person to know. What a resource. So we really appreciate you making yourself available to Arizonans and the program. You said you helped Will Humble Herd State. He's this is great. One of the favorite things about having Dr. Humble on here is he helped develop these rules.
Yeah.
So is this a good time for me to jump in on the history lesson, or do you have more guests?
No. Let me just quickly introduce the guests. But
Okay,
Caleb,
come back to me and I'll tell you why we never did testing in the beginning.
Yeah, no, we got to let Dr. Humble just go for like 10, 15 minutes and talk about this. So let me introduce our other 2 guests, and then we're going to get a report on the history first. Any questions for Brenda? Thank you for joining us.
Just real quick, Brenda, I'd love to see, have you found just over, obviously in the last decade, that there seems to be more consumer awareness about testing and testing regulations, just kind of how that, just briefly on how that evolution.
Yeah, there definitely is. So at the beginning, it's hard again, which we'll get into, to what do we test for and what are the tolerance levels? And, the consumers are always, why do I care? I've been using it for decades, and I'm fine. And so, but when it becomes to the level that it is, and it's there's rules and regulations about it, it becomes very important. What I saw in the state of Arizona when I very first opened up was terrifying. As far as what I saw in samples, I had, the seizuring children's families were moving into our state to use CBD. CBD isolate was brand new to the industry. I had, mothers saying, I spent my last dime on this CBD because it's the only thing that works. And I would test it and there wouldn't be any CBD in it. And there, it was frightening what I would find using a mass spec library in those samples. And so that story alone is the reason why we test. Is if you're going to tell us that, that there's CBD in here, I can't tell you how many times I've tested CBD from a gas station that has no CBD in it. So, I mean, what a waste of your money. So I think consumers are starting to realize, especially on the CBD side, how important it is to test. But then from the, the cannabis side, just the level of pesticides. I mean, I've found lead in gummy bears and, arsenic in oils, and it's just crazy what you see. And so if that made it to the public market, it's terrifying. And so I think consumers realize that. I think at first, without the education, they think it's a waste, and they always say no other industry does it like this. But there's a reason why we have to regulate the way that we do, and I think it's like I've always gravitated towards the regulation because it's very, sorry, my cat is trying to spill my coffee, but because I saw specifically in Arizona when I was there. It was scary what I was seeing. So you have to educate a little bit the consumers, but they do get on board pretty quickly.
It's fantastic, Brenda. I'm just getting to know you here, and it's our honor to have you permanently on our website for the next year. As a resource for people, which is just fantastic. So thank you for making yourself known and for advocating for such an important topic. And so thank you very much for joining us.
Absolutely.
Barb from Pure Labs. You're on mute.
There, that's better. Hi, I'm Barb Dow with Pure Labs, and I was involved with Ryan and George back when we were trying to pass the testing bill, SB 1494, I think it was. And we worked really hard to get that passed and to help people understand what's in this marijuana. I don't think that people really understand that a marijuana plant and hemp plant will suck up everything and anything that it can. And so it's very different than tobacco, where tobacco is a very picky plant and doesn't want to eat everything in sight, where cannabis does. And that's why we see issues with still today, Brenda, we're seeing arsenic in everything. We're seeing lead, mercury, residual solvents that really shouldn't be there. And the pesticides will just blow your mind, the kind of pesticides that we're seeing. So it's really important that we are doing the testing. And I think a bigger part of our job in our labs right now is educating the clients that come to us to help them understand that different strains pick up different elements that's in the soil or hydroponics in the water. And so that's a big part of it. Our lab, just like Ryan's, we're 6,600 square feet. We've got 35 employees. We've got double of every instrument there is, and just going, crazy. And we were all a little overwhelmed come November and December. And I think some of the issues back then were that clients were bringing in their cannabis to be tested, but they weren't quite knowing what to do or what not to do. So it's been a learning curve for everyone. It doesn't matter if it's been the dispensaries or the kitchens or the distillers or the cultivators or the labs. It's been a learning curve for everyone. And I think finally now all of us have our feet underneath of us and we're going forward. We're still helping some people to understand some of the testing protocols and why we have to follow such strict rules from DHS. And it really is totally for patient protection and, consumer protection.
No, absolutely. I have a close friend who has MS, and he uses it for medicated. He medicates with cannabis, and if you don't have good testing, I mean, you never know. So thank you for joining us. Anything else about Pure Labs that you want to add before we move to the last panelists and then Dr. Humble?
No, I think we're right in there with the other labs in town, and we're working hard to make sure everybody gets their results as quickly as we can and with accuracy. And so that's a big thing. Everybody wants their results immediately, but sometimes we have to rerun things because controls don't pass, and so we have to do this the right way, and that's what we do.
Well, thank you for joining us. This actually helps us so much that we can, there's some really good labs right here, and anybody who's asking us about labs, we're going to say, go check out that video episode, and then that's great. So thank you. Caleb, any questions for Barb?
Yeah, Barb, what brought you into cannabis testing?
Well, I have a little bit of a sordid past. I used to live in Asia, and so I was very much involved with Asian medicine and Chinese medicine. And I lived in Africa, so I was very much into animism and their voodoo religion, and which came along with medicine. And then I lived in India for quite a while, and I was very much into Ayurvedic medicine. So when I came back to the States, I thought, there's no way I can do this Western medicine. We need to do this. And then when I realized that cannabis wasn't even tested, like, how do you even know what's in this stuff? Are you kidding me? It picks up, I mean, they plant cannabis and hemp around Chernobyl to clean up the soil. So what's in it here in Arizona? And so that's what really got me involved, is I wanted to know exactly what's in this. And, you know, my advanced degrees are in computer science, not the hard science, but I'm very used to managing very educated, highly educated people. So I thought, well, it can't be that tough, can it? Well, this is a lot tougher than it looks, a lot tougher.
I can imagine. I look forward to hearing more. We're going to dive in. So world traveler Barb over here. Love it. Love it. That's an amazing story.
She said Asia. I was curious, but a lot of people say Asia, but I like it. I like it.
Korea. I was in South Korea for a number of years.
I hear Asia, I think of the risk game. So,
Oh,
sorry, I'm a simple
Throwback. Love it.
Yeah, sorry. Our last lab here for today, unless we get Tanisha back from level 1, is James Horvath from Kecha. Are you available?
Ma'am, I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties with the video. I hope you can hear me.
Well, you're signed in twice. I'm not sure what that means or why that is.
That means I dialed in because no one could hear me earlier. So I had video, I could see everyone, but no one could hear me or see me. So I dialed in.
You sound great. Why don't you tell us about Kecha, where you guys are at and what you guys are doing, who you are?
Well, I appreciate everyone's time and I appreciate being invited to this panel. Thank you. Arizona is actually our latest location. We only leased the space for building out the lab in the past 30 days, and we're in the middle of our build out in Arizona. But many of our labs started in 2014. We have 11 labs in 10 states. So we're currently besides Arizona, we're in California, Colorado, Florida, Massachusetts, Nevada, New York, Oregon, and Tennessee. Tennessee sounds like an outlier, but that's our hemp-focused lab. There's 10,000 hemp licenses in that state. It's our DEA lab, and it focuses mostly on CBD and hemp. Most of our labs are anywhere from 6 to 11,000 square feet. They have at least 2 sets of equipment. Some have 3, 4. Our lab in Davie, Florida has 6. So we, as a corporation, I believe, run over 100,000 tests a month in cannabis. So we have a lot of research information that we've worked on over the years. We have a lot of R&D work that we've done with different clients in different states. We've dealt with different problems across, right, from Oregon to Florida. So we cover the whole country and we see a lot of strange things. And, you know, so we've tested pretty much everything under the sun that anyone can imagine, things that I probably don't even want to talk about on this call, but it's been fun. And we've been very blessed in that our clients have been very loyal to us, and we've managed to grow at a steady pace of 3 labs every year. And right now, Arizona is on our number 1 priority list. We've got a lab director, we've got a lab, we've got equipment ordered, and we're hoping to be up and running in the summer.
Do you have the machine that goes bing? I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah, lots of them.
Caleb gets my humor. I like to talk about those things that nobody else does. No, but sorry.
Yeah,
James,
the toast is done. Yeah.
You know, I mean, sometimes, you know, the subject can be a little bit dry, but I like to keep it, you know, a little bit funny at times too. So sorry, Caleb.
Love it.
He always makes me apologize afterwards.
No, science is a dry subject, I assure you. So I appreciate it. Trust me.
When do you guys see yourself opening up, James?
In the summer, right? It's going to be dependent upon the state, but we're pretty quick at this, right? We've done it enough times. We usually get from construction to ISO completion in 3 to 4 months. So we'll be, we're already applying to the state, even though all we have is a physical building. we have a pretty good relationship with PGLA and A2LA. We've got obviously hundreds or maybe even thousands at this point, SOPs. We've already been working at other labs on the analyte list that exists in Arizona. So our methods are already set. The equipment purchases are already there. We've put up labs very quickly. I believe at one point we had set up a lab from zero to fully operational with trained staff and ISO accredited in less than 4 months. So we're assuming it's going to be somewhere in the summer. It'll depend on the state. Hopefully no later than August.
Well, we look forward to meeting you. I don't think we ever met in person, but make sure you attend some NETA meetings during the summer. And,
Well, quick note. I'm from Arizona. I went to Arizona State. My family lives in Arizona. I will meet you, and I will be part of NETA, and we will be part of the Cannabis Lab Associated, and we will help with whatever we can.
Yeah.
That's my roots, right? I'm from there.
well, please support the work that Barb, Brian, and George and the rest of the group has been doing.
100%.
They're very closely associated to patients' rights and consumers' rights. So just reach out to
As
them.
are we.
at this point.
As a matter of fact, we started off by building an app called MJ Buddy, which is a medical efficacy app for medical cannabis, which still is being run today by numerous research entities for tons of different symptoms and ailments. So this was how we got started, was patient safety and marijuana efficacy on treatment.
Well, META stays out of the political game. Still too complicated for us to understand. But we do know right from wrong, and the testing lab group does a great job. So make sure you to join them. And
I already wrote down the notes and already going to happen, right? So I'll be contacting them within the next 7 days, I assure you.
saw Ryan over there shaking his head at me. I like that. Caleb.
Yes, James, is your lab here going to be doing hemp as well as cannabis? I saw that most of your labs that you've set up across the country do both.
Right. So obviously with larger CBD manufacturers, they want a local lab. So we will accommodate that. But if it's not required, meaning they don't care, we send it to Tennessee. So yes, all of our labs do test CBD, hemp, lately Delta 8, which we're not real thrilled about, all these products. But we strongly suggest the client to send their products to Tennessee. It just makes it easier on everybody because we can control all of the structure of how we're doing things. And usually with cannabis, it's so much busier. You don't want to be tying up equipment time and chemist time working on, a CBD dog treat when there's, like most of our states, working on medical marijuana where patients are waiting for this. So that lab's dedicated to CBD. They know everything. They've got all they're set up to do that. And the turnaround time is fantastic. So we suggest that, but we don't force it.
We should, and not that I'd get involved in this stuff, but there should be a state law that says anything that is sold in the state of Arizona that claims to be CBD should be tested somehow.
Well, Oregon has something similar like that, where they
Nevada does
it
too.
all through the OLCC. Does Massachusetts have something similar like that too?
Right. So what we do is
Nevada
we take all the
does.
state hemp. Yeah, we take all the hemp regulations for every state, and we test for all of those analytes at the lowest levels in Tennessee. So unlike many states that only have 12 or 16 or 20 pesticides, let's say, we test 69 and we're going to 100 and some with AOAC out of Tennessee. So when you get a COA, you're going to have a COA that's legit in every state, which is tough to do when you're running a cannabis business that has very specific analytes that they have to test for in that state. You have 4, heavy metals analytes, but in New York, there's 7. So what are you supposed to do? Run all 7 quality control checks all the time for the couple of hemp samples that come through. It's not really cost effective. So this is why we chose to do it this way.
That makes sense.
Okay, so I'll turn it over to Caleb. Caleb can start and then introduce Will Humble, and then he can tell about the history, etc. But just one quick question, because this is something that's really bothering me as a layperson. The whole, CBD sold in Circle K doesn't have to be tested by anyone, state or federally. why don't we have a state law that requires that to be tested before it's sold in Circle K? Brian, do you want to jump in
Yeah,
there?
if it is sold from a dispensary, anything that is sold out of a state dispensary does require COA. But to your point, the gas station CBD and those type of things, there is no a federally consistent or a federal standard as far as what the testing is required. It's very much state to state. It's an unregulated market, and that's to Brenda's point, it is buyer beware until we have better processes and a solidified, consistent testing requirement for CBD across the board.
But in theory,
Right, but that's not true in all states.
I'm just saying there's not one federally, is what I'm saying.
but in theory, the state of Arizona could pass a law that says any product sold that says CBD on it has to be tested within the state of Arizona prior to being sold by Circle K.
Correct, and they do have that for industrial hemp program as far as the cultivation, but not for, and that's just to certify that the crop isn't hot. But they don't have it for the individual products here in the state of Arizona.
But you guys, I mean, this stuff, you see this nice glow about me. It's from not being involved in politics, but that's something that I'd be interested in championing, Ryan, because I hate bullshit. And so if you want to talk to me about that, let me know. I might just jump in on that one. But Caleb,
you know how I feel about bullshit, so.
Caleb.
All right. So this is thank you everybody for being here today. Very important information, safety, education, and we're going to learn about how this program has developed over the course of the last decade in Arizona, where we're at, and educate you as well about more of what's happening in the labs and give you kind of an overview of their processes. So to help you just get a better understanding of the pieces back and forth. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Destiny, can you give me screen sharing authority, please? Cool. Oh, and I will go ahead and start the slideshow. All right. So as we mentioned here, these are objectives and outcomes for the panel today. Is we're going to learn about the history of cannabis testing in Arizona. I know we touched on it a bit, and really looking forward to getting this input from Mr. Humble. We're going to talk about the various compounds for which cannabis is being tested, and have a discussion there about what is mandated versus what is optional, and the benefits of going for that full panel. Why testing is important for the longevity of the cannabis program, and ultimately what testing means for patient safety and quality control. So that's really the focus of cannabis testing, is knowing what you're buying. So if we look at the history of cannabis testing in Arizona, I'll leave this slide up for just a minute, and then we're going to go ahead and shift over. So we have the program inception that happened in 2011 up through 2019. So I would let's get Mr. Humble to go ahead and chime in here on what was happening at the department side related to testing when the program launched.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb, and thanks, everybody. So, yeah, when the voters approved the Arizona Medical Marijuana Act back in November of 2010, it gave the Arizona Department of Health Services all the authority that we needed to set up a required testing protocol and program for dispensaries. I mean, we did not need any extra authority. The statute gave us everything that we needed. The task before us as we were implementing the law was to put together the administrative code, or the rules that would make the actual medical marijuana program work. And I can remember debating with my team back in very late 2010 and early 2011 about the issue of testing. But and in the end, ultimately, we decided not to put any testing requirements in at all. And so I want to give you a little background of why that is, because it might seem counterintuitive that a state health department wouldn't want any kind of testing standards in place, because that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But remember, there was all kinds of drama back in those days about the conflict between state and federal law. And that conflict still exists, but it was a much more intense debate about that conflict between state and federal law, because we were only the 15th state to have a medical marijuana program. And so we were on the initial cutting edge of these medical programs. And I worked for a Governor Brewer, that was getting a lot of her legal advice from then Attorney General Horn and Bill Montgomery, who was the county attorney in Maricopa County, who kept letting folks up at the governor's office know that this whole medical program is against federal law, and that they were arguing that we shouldn't implement any of it, even the cards. They were urging us not to have dispensaries, not to issue cards, to just let people go to doctors and write a little piece of paper, and back there was a safety valve in that Medical Marijuana Act that said, if the state doesn't implement the program, then a doctor's note is enough to give you the authority to possess 2.5 ounces or to grow it, 12-year-old plants. So there was all this pressure on in the executive branch of government about this conflict between state and federal law. I reached out to Dennis Burke, because he was the U.S. attorney for Arizona at the time, and under the Obama administration. And he wrote a letter back that didn't give us any comfort. I mean, I knew nothing. I knew the feds weren't going to come and bust us for setting up dispensaries, but there was a legitimate concern amongst others in the executive branch that that might happen. And so it was enough that we were implementing the program in and of itself. And to add on top of that, the layer of uncertainty that would have been created by requiring a testing program, and along with that, requiring dispensaries to have the tests go out to labs that didn't exist. There were no laboratories to do the testing at the time. Plus, labs were, most labs receive contracts or have contracts with the federal government. And the feds were saying, if you touch this Schedule I substance, you could forget about all your other contracts. And so I began to believe that it would be counterproductive to include a testing program, because we would have required dispensaries to do something that they couldn't find anyone to do for them. There was nobody to do the testing. And furthermore, not a high likelihood that a real industry would develop in the short term, because the risks of touching the plant and doing the testing far outweighed whatever revenue sources that they would be getting in, because they were, they're all living off of either, environmental labs are living off of DEQ type of work, and EPA and clinical labs are all using federal money through Medicare, Medicaid, and others, and to say nothing of NIH. So I started to feel like, look, we've got a hell of a lot of work to do in the next 120 days to get this program up and running. The testing seems to me to be pretty complicated. And I was already getting beat up a lot by people for they believed that I was trying to sabotage this program from the beginning. And so you could go look at the public record and the comments that we were getting back in 2010. They were overwhelmingly urging us not to do testing, because they'd say, let us decide what we want within the dispensaries. If we want to go to a dispensary that does testing, then that's where we'll shop. And if we don't care, then we won't, we'll take a lower price, and we don't care. And so if you require testing, then all you're trying to do is sabotage this program and increase the price of the medicine for people with all these conditions and stuff. And so I'm just downloading here, because I had felt so abused by the stakeholders, not you guys, I don't mean you guys like y'all here on this now, but the people that were coming to these public meetings were not the industry. It was the free the weed crowd. That is who was coming to these meetings. And you know what they're like. You're laughing because you know they didn't want any regulations at all. It was all about, they wanted a recreational program from the get-go that had no boundaries on it. And finally, I just gave up and I'm like, you know what? Fine. If I'm going to take this much grief about the testing, I'm taking enough grief as it is. There aren't any labs to do the testing anyway. They do have a point about caveat emptor that we're going to have 120 dispensaries and some can choose to do testing and some can choose not to do testing, and patients can decide they care about testing or that they don't. And for the labs that, or for the dispensaries that send their stuff out, that you would assume that it's going to cost a little bit more and the patients would be willing to pay that extra cost for it. And so that's why we never did it. We could have done it. The bills that went to the legislature were never really necessary because the ADHS always had the authority to require testing. One more piece of that went into my thinking about why we didn't do testing in the beginning was because if you set up testing, you have to have standards. And we didn't have any standards. There weren't any standards out there like how much arsenic can you have? How much of an insecticide can you have? Because with the detection limits the way they are these days, you can't just say non-detect. You have to say what the threshold, what's the acceptable threshold. We didn't have any of those numbers to hang our hat on. And we were still trying to get the card program up and running. We had to set up the database. We had to get the rules published. We had to get the applications ready for the dispensaries, which, as you know, for political reasons, was stalled for like 18 months before we were able to do that. And so that's the history of why we didn't do it. It's on me. I decided not to do the testing. In retrospect, if I was going to do a hot wash sort of on my own decision making, what I should have done was, and I didn't even think of this, but I should have thought of it because it's an easy concept, is to roll the program out in 2010 and in 2011, get the dispensaries up and running, and then put a trigger date into the rules that would have said, but by 2016, these sets of tests will be required. And that would have given the testing industry that what we're talking about here the rest of the afternoon, it would have given the labs a chance to build their business models out. It would have given a chance for the Obama administration to work out the problems that I thought they were going to solve with the whole Schedule I thing. And then we could have had testing done a few years earlier than we ended up having it, because in the end it took, before the department felt like it was a priority, it needed to go to the state legislature with that supermajority, which is what ended up compelling ADHS to set up the testing protocols to begin with. So I don't want to belabor the point. I just wanted to give the history lesson of, why we didn't do it. We could have done it, but it was more work than it felt like it was worth, to just tell you the truth, given all the other stuff that we had to deal with and given the level of abuse that I felt like I was taking. I mean, I had to call Phoenix PD for help. I didn't have any security detail from the state. So Phoenix PD was camping out in my neighborhood for a month in early 2011, just because I had threats. And I thought we did a good job. I mean, and by the way, and I'll stop talking after this, which is, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'm just saying that statute was written in such a broad way that if somebody else was in the job I was in that wanted to sabotage this program, it could have easily been done. It could have been as easily done as saying everyone needed to be 100% vertical. That decision right there would have made the industry completely different than the way it is right now. So anyway, I know this isn't the hostile crowd, but they are out there still.
Well,
All right.
it makes sense, Dr. Humble, just given short amount of time frame, and certainly I appreciate getting that additional color of what you were having to go through of you're trying to implement the will of the voters and trying to balance between all the different stakeholders. And yeah, I read through some of those comments as well too. I was active right there as I was doing my dispensary application, and yeah, there were some pretty mean folks, I guess is the best way to put it. So
And I
Caleb,
think actually, I think my old blog is still up on the AZDHS website, and you can look at the comments in the blog in 2011 and see how mean people were to me.
yeah, Caleb, I think Brenda wants to cross-examine Will here for a second.
Oh,
No,
yeah, yeah.
I actually want to support a little bit that Will was saying. So when I started AZ Med testing in 2011, I think I was the 4th, maybe 5th lab in the nation. There were no standardized standards for anything other than THC, CBD, and CBN. Those were the only standards you could get. When I looked at opening the lab in early 2011, they were not readily available unless you held a DEA license. ResTech came through and started diluting them for us. I had to sign a waiver saying I would not eat them. And then they allowed us to have them in-house. Because there were no acid standards, we ran everything by a GC because we didn't care about decarboxylation because there were no standards for it. Then we came out with additional standards, and we found as the more and more standards became readily available, we found that peaks were co-eluting, and we were reporting higher levels of CBD because CBC was co-eluting with it. And the second that we were able to separate those peaks, everybody's CBD dropped by half, if not more. So there was a lot of troubled issues going on. And again, a lot of this was because we were running by a GC, using a mass spec or FID detector. If we would have been running by HPLC using a diode array, we probably would have had some more insight, but not worrying about decarboxylation. It was cheaper to run it by a GC. So just that alone, just for potency, it was a little bit cumbersome. Even just to get standards in-house, I had to jump through hoops for months. So, to Will's point there, it was a little, much more cowboy land, the wild, wild west back then, because, some of our standards weren't even readily available.
Well, yeah, it's Ryan, I want to get your perspective because you had stated you started around 2014 timeframe. So let us see just in a couple of years of how much that had changed to get perspective of you getting your lab up off the ground.
Oh yeah, kind of as Brenda said, man, it was very limited in the beginning because there wasn't a broad standard, there wasn't analytical standards to order. And the Arizona market in general had a huge challenge put in front of it to retroactively put in a regulated and mandated testing program when the program had already grown to such a size. To try to retroactively apply that to such a large, what was it, 750 million roughly, right around there for medical sales, to retroactively apply that, right? And then to think about over the course of the last 8 or 9 years when the testing was available, the testing that was available to licensees and cultivators and manufacturers of products was, potency, residual solvents. Some of these instruments that detect pesticides at very low levels or heavy metals, things like that, are extremely expensive. They're as much as a 3 or 4 bedroom house. So when those instruments weren't available and that level of sensitivity wasn't available to the market, they kind of went off of all the information that they had available to them, told them that everything seemed to be okay. But now that we have these instruments in, and now that we're really digging down and getting down into some of the lesser concentrated compounds, the compounds of interest and safety concerns, well, now people are having to relearn and figure out, hey, where's that contamination come from? Where are these issues originating from? So they really had to expedite that learning curve of figuring out, how do I control my environment and my cultivation and manufacturing process to ensure that there aren't any of these safety concerns. And just recently they've had access to that data. So it really has, they've really had to hit the accelerator as far as that learning curve goes.
Thank you for that, Ryan. So, Barb, I want to get your perspective. I know you were involved with the Senate Bill 1494 and the ultimate development. So Ryan kind of touched on that, of having to sort of bolt on to an existing program that it was already such a large program. So would love to hear about kind of that development and your involvement in helping to ultimately get those standards passed. You're on mute, just a reminder. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So once 1494 passed, we knew that we were going to have stakeholder meetings, and the advisory council was there. So a lot of time was spent. People were around the table, people were in the audience, comments were going left, right, and center. You know, presenters came and suggested how we could do this or that. Even with all of that hard work to get that done, it still is, you know, I've got a Pure Labs Arizona special blend for residual solvents. Pure Labs Arizona special blend for pesticides. So to Brenda's point and to Dr. Hubble's point, saying, you know, the standards aren't out there. It's still kind of the same thing. We have to have very specialized blends to get what we want done to reach the state levels of what is safe and what's not safe. And, you know, DHS has done an incredible job making sure that we're doing what's safe, and they've looked at all the other states. And I mean, we put a ton of work into getting these rules. And even so, you know, we still are tweaking them here and there. So, and what's really nice, and I hope that James will join us, is that our ACLA group, our science group, you know, we really do work pretty tight together. We're all competitors, but, you know, Ryan and I, George and I, we all talk to each other all the time, because, you know, if you're having problems with this or that, or where are we going on this, or, you know, you ask another lab, you know, figured out which analyte or why you have problems, can you get the CCV working? So we do work together pretty well, because it's a pretty strenuous program that DHS has put together for us to follow. And, you know, I don't know, will it change if it becomes federally legal? You know, will things move back and forth a little easier across state lines? All of that's to be seen, but we've still got a few years until that's going to come around.
So a couple of things I want to ask Barb. You mentioned about special blends. What are you referring to there?
So if you call up ResTech or CPI or whichever company you're buying from for the analytes and the standards, they have like a list. If you go into Cerilliant, one of our suppliers, it'll say Oregon pesticide list. So Oregon has their list of pesticides very specific. Well, that's fine and dandy. We could buy that, but it's not Arizona's special list. And so you can't just have Oregon's list and then add on a couple analytes to make the Arizona one. We can't do that ourselves. So we have to hire these third-party companies that make these standards to make our special blends. And so that's what we've done. You know, you can go ahead and buy the California pesticide list, but it's not exactly the same as what we need. And DHS has us that we have to proficiency test against every single analyte. And if we have extras in there, then we've got to do all this extra paperwork on the COA. So it really, you know, in the long term, it's better to get your special blend that matches what DHS says.
Yeah, and Caleb, just to bring clarity for the panel, when we're referring to these analytical standards, that is a pure form of the individual compounds we're looking to identify. So essentially, these are the things that we feed into the instrument prior to running analyses that help us know that we're seeing what we're looking for. So we'll put a very pure analytical standard of the THC molecule, and then the instrument will say, this is how I see THC. So then we know every time we run a test that anytime we see that's THC. So when they refer to analytical standards, it's basically the compound in a pure form. That is how we kind of tune in our instrument so we know we're seeing the right thing.
Got it. So it's like the calibration weight for a scale for your machines.
Very similar. And each state has a different combination of chemicals. There's a lot of different things that go into it, but yeah, a lot of these standards have to be custom made and custom blended to make sure that we're able to do all of our QA QC that is required of us to ensure accuracy and repeatability for the analyses.
Thank you, Ryan. No, I appreciate that. That definitely helps a lot. So James, I'd want to get your perspective as you're coming in as new lab coming into Arizona of what are some of the things that you've seen that are different from other states, or that some problems to solve, challenges to overcome.
Well, one of the reasons we chose or made the decision to come in Arizona because they did get a pretty good set of testing regulations out there as far as the, patient safety is concerned. The things that we see in states that cause problems usually is not having the lab do sample selection. That's usually a big problem because, we've been in Colorado since 2004 and 14, I'm sorry. And I personally have seen the same batch ID with 3 very different products. One was almost white because it'd been dipped and bleached and microwaved. And one was obviously grown in a closet somewhere to pass on pesticides. And the other one was dusted with keef and was the tightest, top cola bud they had to test for potency. So in a scenario where that happens, you're going to have issues because there's always good players and bad players. But Arizona's analyte testing list is pretty solid in relation to the rest of the country. There's better, there's worse. Batch sizes, same thing, better, there's worse. It's sort of top end, middle of the road, I guess I would explain it. So it's not going to be a big issue for us in particular because every single analyte that's listed in Arizona is in another state that we're in. So we've already got methods and structures for taking care of that. It's more along the lines of, as I've heard some of the other panelists talk, it's new, right? It's new to the growers, it's new to the processors, it's new to the dispensers, getting everybody used to understanding how to pass a compliance test by ensuring that they're doing everything correctly with the way that they handle the product, the way they cure the product, the way that they're prepared to dispense the product, working with the labs to do environmental testing, to do nutrient uptake testing, to do pre-R&D testing to ensure that if they need to do some type of remediation, moving it to a distillate, if they've got micro problems, so on and so forth. So I don't see a lot of issues going into Arizona because you guys are pretty good, right? That state did it sort of right? I guess when you wait a little bit longer than everybody else, you get to see everyone else's mistake. You look at all the other states, what's right, what's wrong, and you get to put out a sort of not ridiculously hard like Massachusetts or California or Florida, and not ridiculously easy like Oregon or Colorado. So it's nice. We're very pleased with the way that Arizona's implement their regulations for testing. Obviously, every state has room for improvement, but we're looking forward to it. You did a good job.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that perspective. So I know that we're testing regulations got published, and then it was a mad dash up to November 1st, and then there was a few of them that got delayed that is now looking to get that full panel implementation on May 1st. So would love to get perspective from the panel on that, how you guys led up to that testing deadline, like some perspective of what it was like being in your shoes. Barb.
Well, I think, we were all in a mad dash, and, it wouldn't have been so chaotic back last year during the summer or in September, October, November, if COVID hadn't hit. COVID was really, really tough. So what people don't realize is, when you're watching the TV and the news and they're saying on Channel 5 at night that, see those little clear vials going around on those machines that they're going to put the vaccination in? Well, those are the same vials we use. So when I had orders of vials to be used, my suppliers just took them and sent them to one of the vaccination companies, and that was it. I had no choice. I mean, I'm jumping up and down saying, I need those. And they're like, yeah, you know what? We need it for the vaccination. Sorry. And then the other thing were syringes. We have to use these syringes. Well, it turns out the syringes we use have to be the same ones that they need for the vaccination stuff. So COVID really hit. It was really hard to find scientists because scientists were jumping on the COVID bandwagon and say, hey, I can make a boatload of money doing this COVID testing. I'll see you guys, cannabis people, later. So we lost people to that. So I think COVID was tough for us. And then, and so then that kind of delayed some of the stuff with everyone along the line, whether it was the supply chain or DHS coming in to check us and test. And, you know, everybody is, can you let people in your lab? We want to, everyone's masked up, you know, we're careful anyways, but still that was an issue and DHS was worried about it too. So once they did come in and check everything we had, and I mean, they looked through a microscope checking to see us. And so, you know, we went back and forth and we had to get PT tests. And so it was always constantly one thing after the other trying to get ready. And then DHS realized that, you know, some of these analytes we just couldn't get our hands on. And so the mycotoxins was delayed and some of our pesticides were delayed. And that was also part of us working along with ADA, is because there was some give and take there. ADA kept saying, why don't we roll this out slower? And so the things that were rolled out slower were the mycotoxins and some of the pesticides, because they were a little bit tougher to get. And that we thought was a good compromise for everybody all the way around. So I think we worked well that way. And like at Pure Labs, we've been doing mycotoxins all the way along because, you know, we had it all set up and ready to go. And so that's given our clients a chance to be able to get their cultivation set and ready to avoid getting tripped up with mycotoxins. So, you know, I know it was a little dicey and a little tough, but some of it is still, you know, trying to get clients to get their samples into us that follow the rules, chain of custody that we have to follow. So, you know, they weren't used to doing that. But now people are getting the hang of it. And I think testing is coming around a lot faster. You know, and it's cleaner. Some people are learning that they can't grow certain pesticides because we're going to catch them. Yeah.
Yep, changing practices.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's, and that's exactly what the standards are designed for, is to weed out those bad apples, pun intended. So, Ryan, what about on your side? Love to get your perspective about how that implementation was for you.
Yeah, I think, you know, similar to what Barb said, leading up to that November 1st deadline, ideally, you know, we would have liked to have seen 3 or 4 or 5 labs accredited as early as July or August to accommodate so that people could do the testing to fill their shelves on November 1st. Well, if you went by the statute strictly, the language in the statute, technically by the statute, nothing after November 1st should have been on the shelves or sold that wasn't fully tested. Well, that wasn't really a realistic expectation from the Department of Health Services to put on the licensees, because none of the labs were ready early enough in order to accommodate that, right? And as we got closer to November 1st, there were a couple sticking points that a few labs had in common. They were lagging behind. Certain labs were lagging behind in achieving their mycotoxin accreditation. And some were having issues with 3 or 4 or 5 different compounds out of the pesticide panel. So it was elected that the capacity would have been such that it would have created an even greater bottleneck had we strapped them with the requirement for mycotoxins and the additional pesticides. So by removing those 17 pesticides, it made the pesticide panel a little bit easier to execute and get used to. And then by removing mycotoxins, it also made sure that we didn't compound the capacity problem with a lack of laboratories that were accredited in that particular analysis. So, you know, coming up here in May 1st, hopefully people now are doing the full updated panel so that on May 1st, they can fill their shelves with fully compliant material. And so far we are seeing where, you know, people are submitting for the full panel for May 1st as much as, you know, 7, 10, 14 days ago. So.
Okay, you answered the question I was going to ask on if operators are already getting a jump on that and recognizing. So good. It's good to hear. That's good to hear. So, all right, I want to shift into our next slide. I know we've talked a bit about some of these different compounds and things. So I want to bring this up for just a minute of what are the labs testing for? What are they looking for within cannabis? So first and foremost, of course, and as Brenda had mentioned, initially the only thing that they could look for was a couple of the cannabinoids. Those were the only things that had any kind of standards. Another compound that is being looked at and evaluated is terpenoids. So those are all the various terpenes, the smells and taste chemicals, heavy metals, pesticides, residual solvents. So anything that's in there in any of the extraction process. And then certainly microbials and mycotoxins. So I wanted to, let's see did we get Tanisha back? No, she was able to jump back in.
He's having some internet issues.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, Brenda, I want to open up to you just to kind of touch on a few of these, or maybe you could explain like mycotoxins of why is that important? Why is that something that a consumer should be worried about?
Now, the mycotoxins are the toxins that are produced by certain microbials, and it seems that most people are if they're going to get sick from a microbial, a lot of times it's from the mycotoxins. One of the things that we implemented in Las Vegas that isn't really widespread just yet was Aspergillus. And we could turn this whole debate into Aspergillus if we were in Vegas, because it's kind of a nightmare. I don't know of any other industry that looks for the Aspergillus organism. Most industries look for the toxin that it produces, which is the aflatoxin. But in Las Vegas, they're actually looking for the organism. So, that's why mycotoxins are important. They're important also. I can just say I'm not familiar with the Arizona regulations. I haven't looked at them. But I know that initially the state of Nevada was not looking for mycotoxins in oil, which was kind of silly because when you're concentrating the oil, you're trying to concentrate the cannabinoids. You're additionally going to concentrate the mycotoxins. Most of the processes that you put the plant through to create the oil will kill the microorganism, but it will not kill the mycotoxin because it's a chemical. So it will compound that chemical and increase that there. So I hope I didn't shoot you guys in the foot for if you don't have to test for that yet. But so that's why the mycotoxin is important, is that's generally what is going to make the consumer sick. And I don't know, again, if you guys are testing for Aspergillus, is that on the Arizona regulation? It is, okay.
Barb, you want to go ahead and comment on that?
Yes, we test for E. coli, Salmonella, and the 4 Aspergillus. If the item isn't edible, then it doesn't have to test, or a lotion or a balm, it doesn't have to test. Only if you're smoking it, do you have to test for Aspergillus. And Aspergillus is a pretty big challenge for growers, but people are doing it just fine. They're figuring it out. So that's working fine. Mycotoxins, we've been testing for mycotoxins on everything since about October or so, and very few issues do we see with mycotoxins. So that's good. But Aspergillus is a pretty high hurdle to hit.
I would say that when Las Vegas implemented Aspergillus, I guess I should say Nevada, implemented Aspergillus, about 50% of the market failed for flower. And it was really twofold. We were once again from the analytical side, there were very immature systems there were only 2 systems available at the time to speciate Aspergillus. They were very immature in their creation, so there was a lot of problems there. Additionally, the clients didn't know that we were going to test for it, so they hadn't separate some of their vaults. It had the plant and the money in the same vault, and they'd be counting their money as we were collecting the samples and just covered in Aspergillus. I had one client where their entire building was set up next to a pallet manufacturer, and there was just sawdust everywhere. And so it was a big nightmare. For those of you listening who don't know, Aspergillus lives in paper and wood. It's, the type of black mold you see growing in your bathroom. It's everywhere. We've probably all inhaled it, throughout our day-to-day lives. And then you guys live in the desert, so the dust storms, like air filters, it is everywhere. So some help for you labs, we had to implement some very stringent cross-contamination protocols to minimize Aspergillus within our own labs. As well as teaching clients that, you know, even if we are taking samples in a hallway or somewhere where there's a lot of traffic, you're going to fail Aspergillus. So there was a big learning curve, not only from the lab side, but the you know, manufacturer and cultivation side. I had oils fail because there was construction going on in the building, which blew up some Aspergillus, and as we were sampling, got into our sample. So it's very, very difficult to contain, and it's everywhere. So Aspergillus is going to be very difficult. So that's a big one for especially, you know, the people listening, to really design your facilities with Aspergillus in mind.
Yeah, and it looks like the Department of Health Services actually may remove that for the recreational adult use testing. They haven't finalized the rules there, but to your point there, Brenda, I think they're going to do more of a focus on the actual chemical toxins derived from the microorganism as opposed to the organism itself.
Yep, which is very important in unintended consequences in facility design, or even just things to not, that you wouldn't have thought about, of putting them in the same room and then causing your product to ultimately fail by just by counting money in the same room.
Yeah, Caleb, I think you make a great point. If you don't mind me just piggybacking on that, because it just really set something off for me, is I think one of the most important parts of this program to be successful, for the evolution of the testing and mandated testing program to kind of continue to evolve, it's going to be very important that our clients, cultivators, manufacturers, look to laboratories as a partner to work with. I think sometimes we have a tendency that when we get news we didn't want to hear or we didn't expect, or that may, you know, make us have to destroy or remediate products, you know, that isn't good news for a lot of people. They're not happy to hear it. Right. But if the labs are doing their job and doing it correctly, occasionally we will have to deliver some bad news. I can tell you that the operations that are going to flourish and the ones that are going to really start taking off are going to be the ones that look to the data and say, okay, how can I remediate and fix it on a big picture, you know, large scope type thing? You know, can I do environmental adjustments? Can I work with the lab to better understand how the contamination or the safety concern is originating so that I can alleviate it, as opposed to constantly fighting the data and, you know, going back and forth and kind of having a standoff relationship. My favorite clients are the ones that always want to work with us to better understand and improve. And this is really what testing is here to do, on top of keeping everybody safe. So that's something I'd really encourage people to look to do, is to form a relationship with your lab and become a partner. You know, that's what we want for you, is to improve so that you're passing, and it isn't a guessing game when you're submitting your samples and you're crossing your fingers and hoping there's no issues. We can get to a point where you can have a great deal of confidence that when you submit your samples, it's going to go off without a hitch.
Yep, usually it's crossing fingers because something's happened that they're hoping doesn't get caught. So
sure, and they're still learning. I mean, they're still learning and evaluating their environment. So it's you know, no knock on them. It's just, you know, we love to see more of a collaborative spirit.
Definitely. And I think part of this program and helping to put a face to the labs and you guys reaching out and spending your time is really going to help with that. So I couldn't agree with you more, Ryan. Couldn't agree with you more.
I can say something that I've seen over the years as far as potency and terpenes goes is when I was in Arizona, it was so new. And I would go into clients and I would test top, middle, bottom. I would test different points within the room so that they could get their you know, environmental controls, you know, seemed away. Because now, I mean, the environmental controls now are insane versus back then. So they were really trying to hone in their environmental controls and work with the engineers. And so I took a lot of sampling. Also, what I've seen is when I was testing in Arizona early on, I would say my potency average was probably 15% on average. I would say now my potency average is around 21 or so. And that is because of testing, because how did you know which strains you wanted to preserve and which were throwing the good numbers and which had the better terpenes? Or how did you know to change your environmentals to get a homogeneous room without testing? So that's, right now the dispensaries are using it as a price point. And I'm really hoping that the terpenes kind of take over this potency price point. We should be getting there. I'm hopeful in the next few years. But everyone sees potency as, oh, well, that's the price point, but really it's bettering every single grower out there to have the data. And when I come back and I tell you, I can't tell you how many times I've been testing someone and they're consistently 19%, 19%, 19%, and I hit a 14, their first thought is to blame the lab. And then I go back to the grower and say, what happened? You always grow a 19. Why is this one 14? And we'll go to, one of their cultivators and say, oh, well, the humidity did wig out on us for a week. And well, there you go. And so, that data is really important. And so that's, the potency and terpene side is that's not really a consumer safety issue, but it is bettering our industry as a whole so that they are able to better themselves.
Definitely. Barb, do you want to touch a bit on terpenoids? And because that's one of the areas it's not required. But I actually, more to Brenda's point as well, that is, as the consumer has sort of evolved, that's been more of a focus. I know up here in Oregon, there's about the recreational market's been in place for about 4 years. And that's about how long it's taken for that evolution for terpenes to gain more prominence. So I'd love to get your perspective of what you're hearing from clients and also just what you're seeing.
Sure. Okay. So first, a little bit to talk about what both Ryan and Brenda had said about environmental. Our lab goes out to cultivators all the time, and we test the light switches, we test the air filters, we test everything to help with environmental control so they can try to catch their Aspergillus and they realize where it is. So that's always available to help growers. And then I think on the terpenes, we're starting to see more and more people order terpenes with the full panel. Terpenes are not required because it has nothing to do with health and safety. But I think once the grower and the cultivator has figured out which strain they like better and they get their potency pretty on target, like Brenda was saying, 19, 19, 19. So once they've got that going, then I think it seems to me that they start adding in terpenes because that's what now their clients want to see is they understand that all of these are around 20, 21% for THC. Now what makes this strain a little bit better than that strain when they're about the same for potency, well, the terpenes, and they can't really tell what the terpenes are unless they're asking for the test. So we're seeing more and more terpene tests, and I'm guessing it'll be just like Oregon. It'll take 3 or 4 years before everybody gets on board with terpenes. I don't see it coming into the rules and regulations. I see it more as market driven. So the more that clients, the end user, the end patients want to know which terpenes are where, then that's what will get dispensaries and cultivators testing for terpenes.
Yep, market's going to drive it. James, I'd love to get your perspective of what you've been seeing in the states that you're operating in, and if it's comparable to what we're experiencing as far as with terpenes and the consumer demand.
So terpene testing in Colorado is very low, but Florida is almost 100%. It's a required compliance test in Oklahoma. So the fact that there are states that are looking at it as an active ingredient, I guess, now lends itself to the potential of being added to other states because they're more looking at it as a label claim situation. As I heard earlier on the panel, people who've been in this industry very early, and we've had numerous news agencies come to us as well when CBD was going crazy, and we tested in, like Brenda said, 0% CBD. So same thing with terpenes. At this point, without a test, you can say anything you want, right? So I think it's more demand, and a lot of this is sort of across the country changing a little bit. We see more of a, I don't know if it's a connoisseur type situation with the client, but as potency becomes less important and terpenes get more important, people are looking at the entire profile of the plant and not just asking for the most potent product. Because the reality is, if you want the most potent product, buy shatter, buy a dab, right? Why are you buying flower at 31? Well, better yet, someone claims 38% flower. Come on. Let's be realistic. That's not real, and it doesn't make any difference because my shatter is going to kick your flower's ass, right? I mean, let's be honest. That's not happening. So we see hopefully a benefit happening in the industry where on the adult use side, people are getting more realistic and trying to get probably a more, whether they're looking for an uplifting one or couch lock or whatever the circumstance may be, less interested in the specifics of what the percentages are. And then on the medical side, of course, it's way more important for things like, 1-to-1 CBD versus a high THC ratio, and terpenes are getting involved there. And we're starting to test for flavonoids and for, we're building methods for even more different aspects of the plant, more cannabinoids, more products. And I think that's changing and we see it. And it depends on the market that you're in. California is usually the leader, but I think the East Coast is starting to equal or even overtake it.
Yep, I would agree with you, James. It seems like the newer markets and Arizona being with one in testing is learning from all of the other markets of what's worked well, what hasn't, finding that good middle ground. And I mean, the science has just come so long where it's when the program wasn't started, nobody knew what a terpene was. You had to tell them what the word was, not let alone that it has all of these other synergistic effects with all of the cannabinoids and with each other. So I think that just the education and the knowledge out there and the research that's been done is really helping to contribute to that consumer of recognizing that there's more to it. There's more to it than THC, but you still get those THC chasers. That's for sure. That's for sure. So I want to go ahead and pull this slide up, because we've been touching on a few of these different points of ultimately why is cannabis testing important? Why do we do it? First and foremost is going to be product efficacy and consistency. And I mean, I put it last, actually. I should put safety up at the top. When we're dealing with people are using for therapeutic uses to treat their ailments and trying to improve their lives. We want to ensure the product is safe and they know what they're putting in their body. Cannabis testing educates the consumer, which we've touched on. It educates growing methods. It educates operators to do things differently. And ultimately, what's really creating this robust market in the regulated market is consumer trust. I know that it seems like forever ago, but fall of 2019 and the outbreak of the vaping lung disease that was happening, which ultimately came down to black market products that were using fillers and cutting agents that were never designed to be used and inhaled in that type of product. That's the difference between what you're going to get out on the street and what you're going to get in a regulated market that has gone through all of these testing. So I would love to get some stories on just some of the things that you found. I mean, obviously you don't need to name any names, but Ryan, what's the craziest thing that you found in testing, or the biggest surprise, or just some things you've come across? I'd love to hear some stories.
I mean, I've seen quite a bit nowadays. We've seen E. coli at colonies too numerous to count. We've certainly seen Aspergillus, pesticides at 77,000% higher than is allowed. We certainly have the horror stories, but I think on the other side of that, we've also seen an overall elevation of the quality of products in general, right? When we first started testing, edibles are very challenging. Infused products are very challenging to create a homogeneous representative batch where every one of them is consistent, right? If you would have asked me 5-6 years ago, I would have told you to stay away from edibles because you never know what you're going to get. One could be 200 milligrams, one could be 20. And we were seeing that in the data, whereas now it appears that people are getting a little bit more consistent. They're refining their processes. I think they're better understanding the uniqueness of working with a substance like cannabis. Cannabis inherently is incredibly variable, right? The plant itself is very variable. So therefore, it's good to see that people have refined their processes and gotten better. But we've certainly seen it all, Caleb. We've seen some stuff that I really cross my fingers and hope to God that it never got in any patient's hands. And thankfully now we have a program to help prevent that from happening.
Barb, what about you?
I would agree and echo Ryan's comments. We've seen things that sure glad I wasn't using it. And then I think on the upside is we've really in the last 3 years that we've been in business, we've really seen an improvement in the grows, the cultivations, the edibles. It's really nice that the testings come along so that people have had to step up their game, and which just makes it better for the end user. And that way, you know, they're not going to be searching for the best THC in flower. They're going to be looking for the terpenes, or they want to make sure it's clean and safe. And we really have seen an improvement there. So that makes me quite happy. I'm really proud of how cultivators and kitchens and distillers have stepped up. They don't want to see any residual solvents in their product at all. You know, they're like, how could I possibly have this? Or, you know, they're very concerned if they have any arsenic. Why do I have this? I shouldn't have this. What can I do? You know, so I think people have really tried to step it up. And the horror stories, I hope and I think they're in their rearview mirror.
That's good. Brenda, I'd love to get your perspective, especially in the early days. I know you had mentioned a bit about some of the things that you were seeing. So I would love to hear about the improvement that you've seen, and especially as you've traveled to various markets.
Yeah, and to me, the most important thing is getting results that are as accurate as possible and consistent through time, because it's, as a consumer, especially on the medical side, if your tolerance level, is you can't tolerate over something that's, over a 15, you shouldn't be buying a 15 when it's really a 25, or, whatever that is. And like Ryan said, with edibles, they need to be very consistent, because you don't want to take one bite and have all of the THC, all the 100 milligrams in that one bite. A lot of people can't tolerate that. But it seems like everyone seems to be getting down the homogeneity in edibles. Everyone's figuring out with the emulsification the best way to do different types of edibles, things like that. Like I said, the plants seem to be more consistent because the fertigation systems and the environmental controls that cultivators are using on this grand scale, or they're really fine tuning all of that. But I can tell you one horror story that I had in Arizona, and again had to do with a child who was suffering from seizures, and it was the mother who came in and literally told me she used her last dime to buy this strange powder that she handed me that was supposed to be CBD isolate. It didn't look like isolate. I ran it through the GC. There wasn't one cannabinoid in it. So I called her and said, I don't know what's going on. Do not give it to your son. I then ran it through the mass spec, came up with some random compound. I didn't know what it was. And I Googled it, and it was the main compound found in asthma medication. And if you gave asthma medication to a seizuring child, it would have been extremely detrimental. And I couldn't get her on the phone fast enough. I used to see plant waiting. So I'd get the buds in house and take a look at them under the microscope and find like little micro beads of like sand or something.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
the client's trying to weigh down that bud so they can sell it for more than it was worth. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But those are like the two main things. And that asthma medication story is by far the worst one that I've seen.
Just real quickly, what lobbyists are going to get in our way of trying to pass a law at the state level that all CBD sold, obviously in dispensaries were good, so people can be safe to go there, but all CBD stores sold in Circle K's in Arizona must be tested. Is that that's silly. Ryan, Barb, you guys know politics, Dr.
I mean,
Humble.
I don't know that I can pick out a particular lobbyist or group that would stand in the way for that. Other than the fact that in your brief stint in politics there for the last few years, I know you've stepped away and retired, but it's hard to get anyone to agree in any bipartisan fashion. And considering it's about 50-50 in both the House and the Senate here in this state, it's that would be a little bit easier because it wouldn't be a Prop 105 protected. You wouldn't have a voter protection on that from an existing, ballot initiative. So it'd only take 50%. But I mean, it's difficult. I mean, we have bills down there right now that are languishing because there was a big blow up last week with some of the bills being discussed. We're now red and blue are back at hating each other, and nobody wants to work together and even bring forward good legislation. Because they're mad about one thing or the other across the aisle. So that's the dynamics and the interesting part about politics.
Dr. Humble, what do you think? I mean, I'm always looking for interesting things to be involved in.
Well, I mean, the key to success on getting a bill through is to do your homework and get started early. So you have to, if you have an idea that you want to accomplish, if you want to get it through the 2022 legislative session, now's the time to start. Well, not now, because let this legislative session finish,
Right.
and then start thinking through, who are my sponsors? Who cares about this issue? How can I build a relationship with that person? And do all of your homework when they're not in legislative session, when you can meet them at the bagel shop on a Saturday that they announce on their Twitter, and show up with 4 other persons from your legislative district and have the FaceTime that you need to get that sponsor jazzed about the bill, or find out that they're not jazzed, but they might have someone in their caucus that would be. So the success of bills happen in the off season. And the other thing is, and I've known this my whole career, is that like when we tried to get community health workers certified, or a better example is we tried to decriminalize syringe service programs in Arizona. It's a Class 6 felony to have a syringe services program in Arizona, needle exchange. Believe it or not, we've been trying for 3 years to get that. It's classified as paraphernalia, and county prosecutors tag it on to people who get busted with heroin and add another count for the syringe. So we've been trying to decriminalize syringe programs, and we're going to do it this year, but it took us 3 years. So because you were unsuccessful once, and I know, Dimitri, you haven't even tried this yet, but if you fail and it's important to you, keep trying, because sometimes it takes 3 years or more.
There's a cat in I love it. No, sorry, Will. I got thrown up by the cat. I love cats.
I have a cat.
There's a cat, and Brenda has a cat up there. It was poking its head. No, well, absolutely. Well, let's talk about this. Caleb, if you're, and Ryan, and Brenda, Barb, if any of you guys are interested in exploring this, I don't like people being, jacked around, and Brenda makes some really important points, and so we can, if we do decide to get involved in politics, I think we can have a pretty influential voice, but it is a big pain in the ass, as Ryan has pointed out.
Well, I think in the short term, the solution is to go to all of your state regulated, state licensed dispensaries and support them, support the people that are doing it right.
Yep.
And knowing that ultimately we vote with our wallets, in that the reason that some of those products are available is that people are trying to make a quick buck. So if you focus in on supporting the industry, supporting the programs, and knowing that you can trust the products that are being sold in a dispensary, have gone through this vetting, have all of these amazing people that have invested millions of dollars into their facilities in order to provide all of that information and educate the consumer. I mean, that's the best way that we can help to ensure that these regulations continue and create a model for all other programs.
I didn't mean to interrupt, Caleb. Sorry.
Yeah, no sweat. We got one slide left, and then we'll kind of open it up. I just wanted to touch on, because we've kind of talked about it a bit, but ultimately, what is the importance of testing? What does it do for patient safety, and why do companies do quality control? Because ultimately, we were just talking about a potential contaminant that product hadn't been tested would have been detrimental for that child. So testing protocols are designed to prevent patients from ingesting all of those things that are not supposed to be in your body. It's heavy metals, which I know Barb had touched on, that can accumulate over years and years, and you don't. We don't really know about those effects. So you really need to be thinking about that. For a company and a brand perspective for the operators, and I'm really glad to hear that operators are more open to wanting to find out where the contaminants are coming from so they can change their procedures. I think Ryan had touched on that, because ultimately it's brand reputation. And as brands are developing and growing, as the market is growing, nobody wants to be on that list of a product recall, or this happened with my product once it got to the store, or God forbid, like something negative happens to a patient or something serious happens to a patient from a product that has their brand on it. It just makes all the sense in the world to support solid testing. Okay. Wanted to see, James, if you had anything to kind of touch on that on from a patient safety perspective, and just on the importance.
So obviously, I think many of us got into this business because of patient safety. I mean, I know I started looking into this information because my daughter was diagnosed with Crohn's, and I started looking into the industry. I was seriously concerned about the data that I saw, so I not only built a medical efficacy app, but then we started looking at building laboratories. And I think at its heart, most of the laboratories are there to protect the patient, to, follow regulatory rules. Obviously, that's not the case in all aspects, but I would, I'm an optimist. I like to think that most people have that in their hearts and in their minds. The reality is there's always going to be a way around this, and we just got to be diligent. So we do pay for lobbyists, and we do work with states, and I will work with the group in Arizona on both the lobbying level and with META to try to improve the industry, because there's always a person that finds a way around something. Just, funny story, even from the previous one, you've seen things like, giant cookies, right? The size of a dinner plate. It says legal, right? It's legal hemp, CBD product. Well, it has 10 milligrams of THC in it, but because of the size of the cookie, it's below 0.3. It's legal. Do you understand? This is how the world works. This is why Delta 8 exists, and Delta 10 is going to be more popular, and Kratom exists, and on and on and on. So we'll work diligently towards ensuring patient safety by putting money back into the industry, and hopefully we can work with other labs and other entities that are interested in the same thing. And over time, someone will find something, it'll get caught, it'll get fixed, and we'll move on to the next one. And that's just a never-ending process, and it has been for every industry, not just this one.
Thank you. Ryan, do you want to touch on the same question?
Yeah, he made some very good points. I think just as important as obviously the patient safety is that bar of entry, right? That's how you get into the game, is making sure that your product is safe, right? I think just as important is the targeted approach that testing allows the consumer and patient to take, right? When you better understand the chemicals that make up your product, then you can have a more targeted approach as to the therapeutic benefits and kind of what response your body will elicit from that. As we do more clinical trials, or as we see more clinical trials approved, it's going to be very exciting to see how the analytical data and analytical testing directly correlates to what some of the outcomes are of these clinical trials, and what kind of medical breakthroughs we can make with a holistic approach from a plant, as opposed to always turning to synthesized chemicals and pharmaceuticals. So I think testing, like I said in the very beginning, the evolution of any industry is often led by science and technology, and that's what we're going to get to see, I think, in the coming years with the cannabis testing. I'm excited to increase more bandwidth here within the laboratory to get back to also doing R&D and research. We were able to do that when we were a little bit younger and didn't have our hair on fire with the amount of samples that we have to test. But I'm excited to get back to where we can continue to be thought leaders and contribute to the evolving science behind cannabis medicine.
And just really, Caleb, Sue Sisley's obviously on the call somewhere, and she's pointing out that she thinks we have a chance with that concept over the legislature. And I know if Sue, Will, and I, and Ryan, and some others got involved behind something, I mean, it could really, safety is important.
Yeah, that's why I threw that in there. I wanted to make sure everybody knew that Sue's back there working hard in her clinical trials, participate, get the word out, help her out.
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Sue, for all the work that you do in helping to shift the paradigm in this country. Thank you.
And by the way, I think you'd find more support than you actually realized for this.
Yeah, I'm texting somebody who could finance this right now.
Nice. Barb, I want to get your perspective on that too.
They should be required to be in state labs.
So I think with the consistency is really important. And I really do think, well, I've seen it myself over the last 3 years, that because the state rules came in, when Brenda talked about what was in the flower, we would see constantly little silica, those little packets you get when you buy a pair of shoes or you buy something you're not supposed to eat, it's supposed to take out the humidity. Well, we would see flour with silica sprinkled in it. And one, it was to make it weigh more. But just imagine you've got silica in that flour and then you light that up. Well, that's not going to go very well for you. So when the testing has been mandatory, since it's become mandatory in November, we have not seen one tiny piece of silica in anything since then. And the same goes, I think, for the consistency. And that's why this testing is so important, because it's mandatory. I remember one of the very first bombs we tested, you kind of lotion you'd put on. It said it had 100 milligrams of THC. We didn't find one teeny tiny bit of THC in it. Well, now, because the rules in Arizona are within 20%, it's got to be on the label. We're seeing things that are hitting right within that 20%, not too much over, right in there. People don't want to go too much over because other people, the end user can't handle too much. That's more than they want to use. And so I think because the testing is mandated, people are getting, the cultivators, the kitchens, they're all getting better at what they're doing. And we're just not seeing any of the worries we had before. Consistency is much, much better. We're not seeing people sending in flour that's dripping wet because they want to sell it heavier because it's wet. People have a reputation, and it's really coming about because they can rely on the testing. They know where they're going to stand and where they figure, and if they're not there, the clients are on the phone immediately saying, how come this is too high, or how come this is too low, or how could you possibly find residual solvents there, or why do I have lead in there? So they want to know, because their brand is important, because word gets out. We live in a very small community here, and word gets out pretty darn fast if there isn't something that's just exactly what they expect.
Yes, it does. And reputation goes a long way, and the program has come a long way. And I for one am very glad to see testing having come to where it is now and where this industry is going to go in its second decade in existence. It's been a decade, and what a decade it's been. So thank you very much. I appreciate all of your guys' perspective there and how you're seeing. So Dimitri, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over back to you.
Can I do the ceremony now?
Yes, you can, sir.
So you guys, we always do this with panelists. We break out my grandfather's machete from the fields of Oaxaca. This was his oldest machete they gave to me before he passed away in the 50s. He was a bracero, but he also cultivated marijuana in the mountains of Oaxaca. So with this machete, I anoint all of you social equity mentors for volunteering today. So you can add that to your resume if you'd like, or your whatever. So thank you guys for joining us. But let's allow each of our panelists to say a couple minutes and close up. I think the community got a really good feel for who you guys are and your level of expertise and how we're all better off as a state and a cannabis industry for having you guys around. Dr. Barber, any closing thoughts from Scottsdale Community College?
Yes, I was taking notes, and I would love to interview you all a little bit as we're developing our curriculum, and we want to make sure that we are responsive to industry. So thank you for your insight.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us and our partner, Scottsdale Community College. For the next 10, 20 years, they're going to be teaching about cannabis. This is a one-off for us, and we're turning it over to you guys afterwards. Excellent. Dr. Humble, any closing thoughts?
I really like this this segment. I think it was super informative, and I think I really do. And when we get to the later on, when we're talking about the social equity licenses, it'll give the applicants a sense of, another aspect of what it is that they need to be thinking about as they prepare for success. So and this has been unique. I think the other segments didn't touch on this topic in this much depth. So I'm glad it's a really good topic to have. Well done.
Yeah, and our program is about to become even much more popular. AZ Central is going to do a piece on how the whole 14 modules, 16 modules, and upcoming modules are available for free to the public in general. So that will bring in obviously more social equity applicants and people who want to participate or learn about the industry. So it's great that you guys are on here. And
who's doing that,
available.
Ryan? Is that Ryan Randazzo?
Well, actually, they actually have a special person that's doing it, not just Ryan. So yeah, so Ryan, speaking of Ryan Tracy, you want to say your farewells?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, thank you everybody, Mita, Dimitri, Caleb, for moderating. I do think it was a good discussion to have. I will say, as people are approaching, whether they're looking to branch into the social equity program and get a license or break into the testing industry or any ancillary business, it can seem burdensome, and it can seem like there's just too much to take on at once. Do know that there are lab partners out there, and certainly I would count us among them, that we can take away that pain and help simplify and make you understand and break it down into digestible bits. That we're here to support you. We're here to guide you through the process, answer your questions, relieve your anxiety and angst, and we're excited to kind of usher in the new regulated and safe and effective adult use and medical program. So we couldn't be happier to be a part of it, and we look forward to working with all the labs that are on here today, as well as those different stakeholders that are contributing to the program.
Thank you, Ryan, again for all your service.
Thank you,
Barb?
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, I again echo Ryan. It's really nice to work with a bunch of people that you can call up and say, like, I'm stuck on this. How do we get around with this? Like, who's doing this and how do we do it? And the other part that's really nice is that I've had a number of people call me and say, okay, I just want to get pricing on testing. Like, what do we have to do? And they're actually the ones that are interested in the social equity licenses. So it's nice to hear from people that are doing their homework well in advance. They're hoping they get a license, but they're being very diligent in being prepared. They want to know, like, how much do we have to send in and how do we do it? And what are you testing for? And why do we have to do this? And how much is this going to cost? And how do I make it so I can pass every test? So they really are working hard. And I think this whole series for the social equity is really, really going to help people that didn't have the same kind of guidance back when they were trying to get the first licenses for medical marijuana in the first place. So this is really, really good for the entire community.
Yeah, no, the entire state, college students, executives that are looking to come over, social equity, the amount of information that we're sharing online, it's a very unique thing. So, and it's all because, Copper State, Weedmap, Zuber Lawler, Scottsdale Community College, Dr. Humble have, invested themselves in us and allowed us to do this. So thank you, Barb, for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I'll be there.
You know, I just realized if we attach the CBD thing to more social equity licenses, we can get the Republicans who like regulation to come down on those places like Circle K and require testing the CBD for the CBD that's sold there. We can get some more social equity licenses issued at the same time, because Democrats will love that. So we weave those together, get a nice little bipartisan bill. You see why I had to retire, Ryan? It's just this, I dream of this stuff. It's just.
You can't even help yourself. You want
I
to stay
know.
on, but you can't.
I know. I'll get out, I might just run for governor. That will solve everything.
There you
Just a
go.
cheerleader, Dimitri.
Yeah. I'm actually, we'll see. Somebody needs to make Arizona great again. Brenda, you're up.
Okay, so you guys are embarking on this whole regulated testing thing. I've done it now twice. Dr. Crockett, I'm working with a community college up here with the social equity program at Holyoke Community College. If you want to connect with them, just send me an email. I can get you connected up with them. If you have any questions about their program, that kind of thing. Dr. Humble, hang in there. Like James was saying, if Delta 8's not on your radar, that's going to be coming. If some of these Aspergillus problems, Ryan's going to be shaking his fist at you one day because it's just a pain in the ass occasionally. But it's this lab testing thing is ever evolving. The regulations are ever evolving. Getting anyone to land on the proper pesticide list, let alone the tolerance levels. I mean, we are still in infancy, and I've been doing it for 10 years now, and we still don't have solid programs, and we still don't have, validated tests that we can follow from like the AOAC and things like that. It's an ever-changing thing. What I've been through, I mean, back when I started, we were chatting with Sue about, terpenes and the blood-brain barrier and how much we don't know about it. And when I was when the CO2 extractors launched in Arizona, suddenly the oils weren't working on the seizure in kids. Nobody knew why, so we had to add terpenes. Once we added terpenes, we figured it out. So now the seizure in kids had to flip back to, using the BHO oils and things like that. Well, now we have to add residual solvents because the parents are terrified that, they're going to, fixing their seizures and giving their kid cancer. And so this is ever evolving as we move through all of this, and it doesn't stop. To this day, I'm learning new things. Delta 8 just came on the scene a year or two ago. Now Delta 10's on the cusp of, now they're not regulating that. So now, the people are trying to get around the regulations through things like that. And it's just not going to stop. So this will be an ever evolving. And so, Dr. Humble's taking on a lot by having to regulate labs. And, as James was saying too, there's good and bad players in the lab game. And so as the bad players decide to do silly things, Dr. Humble's going to be banging his head against the wall and, changing the regulations. And that's the way it works. And it's all to better us as an industry moving in that direction. So regulation and testing is the way to move forward because it evolves our industry in the correct direction. It alleviates the bad players and gets everyone on the same game. I've been harping for years for standardization in this industry. A lot of the proprietary methods are behind us. You buy something from Agilent, they hand you the method. You buy something from Waters, they hand you the method. So, I feel like we're on the cusp of also some standardization for us labs, which is fantastic. And it's the way we should be going, but it's one step at a time as we go and take it one thing at a time. And, Dr. Humble, I don't know if you're speaking to other states, but I really encourage that. And I also can give you, the key people to talk to, at least in Nevada and Massachusetts, if you're interested. And I'm sure James has contacts as well.
Yeah, Brenda, just clarification, Dr. Humble is now retired, so he's handled the mantle to his friends over there at DHS, but he still has a lot of contacts, seeing as how he created the
program.
Still
a lot of pull, I'm sure, yep.
You're on mute, Dr. Humble.
Yeah, I still have some contacts in the back room.
Yeah, and by the way, if Dr. Humble runs for governor, I will not run because the state will be in good hands. But in the absence of him running, I think I need to consider it. So don't make me do it, Will. No, but you are one of the greatest public policy makers that I've ever known. And my dad always respected you. I have tremendous respect for you. So thank you for all your service to Arizona. And you put together a great program. James from KCHA.
Well, thank you, Nita, Dimitri, Caleb, everybody here. I mean, to be quite honest, before I got on this call, I didn't really know what to expect about other labs. We obviously compete with other labs in numerous states, and to have a group of labs working together is a little shocking. We've tried that before in other states, and for whatever reason, nobody wants to play nice with us. But we'll be more than happy. I'm telling you, we'll be putting our time, our money, our energy into MITA, into the Cannabis Lab Association in Arizona, into the regulatory aspect to try to help the regulators in that state understand what's happening in other states to try to prevent it in Arizona. And we'll do everything we can to be the best partner and the best competitor that the staff there has.
Oh, thank you,
And
James.
thank you.
And MITA and the Lab Testing Association are both groups that have the same sort of philosophy. We don't just flip over the tables where people are in the temples, advancing financial interests. We take the tables out to make room for community after that.
Sweet.
That's kind of
That's
our
fantastic.
Yeah, we take it one step further. Tanisha from Level 1 Labs. Do you want to say adios, farewell, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen?
Even though I couldn't completely participate because of the internet issues that I've been having, I'm really happy to be a part of this panel. I'm so proud of the discussion that we have. It was amazing. I'm probably one of the newest people to the state, and I learned a lot about the state history for sure.
Well, we love Level 1 Labs. George is a great leader, helped put together the Testing Association, and just much appreciate him as a friend. So, and it's a great organization to work with. So thank all of you. Caleb, do you want to close it up and take us home?
Yes, just again, another great panel, wealth of information. Appreciate everyone on their time and their commitment and everything that you do to make MITA what it is. Look forward to seeing a lot of you. I will be in town and there on the 28th. I know Dimitri said you didn't want to advertise too much, but I look forward to seeing everybody out there, and knowledge is power. So anything that you can do to educate yourself and understand what's going on in the industry, and reach out. All of these individuals have made themselves available, and we want to share our knowledge and help to make the industry better as a whole, and that's by working together.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.